it's James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting November the 25th, 2019. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. This week I'm honoring the request of one of my viewers, Kimball, who over the course of the week hit me up through Facebook asking me if I would be willing to demonstrate how I personally read with playing cards more. So I said, with the Oracle Outlook reading coming up, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to fulfill and honor that request. The deck that I'm going to be using this week is one of my personal favorite decks of playing cards, and it is the Arabesque Playing Cards by Lotrek, and published through his company, Oath Playing Cards. So I will be leaving information in the description box below about the deck. Once again, it is the Arabesque Playing Cards by Lotrek. And now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and see what the Arabesque Playing Cards want to say about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I shuffle, I'm focusing on my usual intention for these weekly general readings. And as for the information, for the insight, for the guidance and advice that is going to be most helpful and beneficial to come through the cards. Feeling one more time. Will be good. And there we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. Fan the cards out. And now I'm looking for 7 cards in the fan that are getting my attention. That's a spread that I want to try out this week. Consists of 7 cards. Looking for the final card. All right. So I'm going to take the remainder of the deck and put that to one side. Take a moment to count the cards back. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's just to make sure I have 7 cards. And so the spread that I'm going to be working with this week is called the Magic Star Spread. I got it from a book called Power Tarot. The book is by Trish McGregor and Phyllis Vega. And what I love about the book is that half the book talks about tarot in terms of card meanings and interpretations, but the second half of the book has a wealth of tarot spreads, and so sometimes I use those spreads for other systems like I'm doing right now. So the way that the Magic Star spread gets laid out is that the first card goes at the bottom, and I'm going to modify this. So I'm going to use this as a 7-day spread, and each card is going to represent a particular day of the week. So the first card is going to represent Monday because I always read from Monday to Sunday. So the way it works is that the second card goes to the right of the first card like so. And that's Tuesday. Wednesday goes on the opposite side. So we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then the card that represents Thursday, card 4, is going to go in the center like so. And then we have a card that represents Friday, going like that. Then we have the card that represents Saturday on the opposite side. And then the final card goes at the very top of the spread. So what I liked about the visual that it goes up, over, up, over, up. Right? So it's almost like an inverted lightning bolt. Instead of coming down, it's going up. Right? And if we go with the idea that the number 7 can represent spirituality. At least that's how I interpret it. Since it can represent spirituality, this would be about ascension, right? Going up, ascending, and we ascend or come into a greater state of consciousness, spiritually speaking, right? We ascend up rather than coming down. So those are just my thoughts on the number 7 in terms of the layout. Okay, so now, having said that, first card represents Monday because like I said earlier, I read from Monday to Sunday. So the energy of Monday is, and here we have the Ace of Diamonds. So diamonds is the suit for me that can represent power, it can represent success, it can represent energy, right? And it's also the suit that can represent material concerns and resources. So here we have with the ace, aces represent the potential. So the Ace of Diamonds can represent the potential for success, right? So here, as the start of the week, it represents like the week could be off to a good start, or that the week in and of itself could be potentially successful or potentially rewarding. That's how I would look at that, right? As maybe as the first card talking about the week as a whole. Specifically, for me, this card can represent a letter. It's known as the letter card, so it can represent either an actual letter or some other form of written correspondence or written communication. So this could be letters, like I said, or it could be text messages or emails, because those are written forms of correspondence. But it can also represent things like paperwork, documents, documentation, notifications, anything in print form, right? So another meaning of this card for me can represent engagement, right? So one of its meanings is it can literally represent an engagement ring, but for me, generally speaking, when this card turns up, I tend to think of it as an engagement, meaning like an event that we attend, right? And so having said that, this is the week where in the United States that we are going to be celebrating and observing Thanksgiving. So it could be that there's going to be, at the beginning of the week, maybe some written correspondence or written communication about an engagement, and that would be possibly the idea of the holiday, right? So that's just a way to take those two separate meanings of the card and put them together to create a third meaning, a combination meaning, right? But again, the Ace of Diamonds can represent written correspondence and engagement. It can also represent, like I said, the potential for success or something being potentially rewarding. It can also be something having to do with money. So there's a potential for somebody to be moving into a space where money is very possible or very likely, right? So that is the Ace of Diamonds. So now let's move up, because what we can do now is that we can take a look and start adding more to that by combining the cards, right? Because each subsequent card can maybe add more to the previous card. So on Tuesday we have, okay, so here we have the 7 of clubs. So clubs is a suit for me that can represent work or business. That's my first go-to for the suit of clubs. It can also represent things of a social nature or something having to do with the public in some way. It can also represent progress. And if it's not about work or business in the literal sense, then it would be something that we are working on or working towards, because this suit can represent action, but it can also represent activity. Right? So it would be something that we are working on, meaning like we're putting some work or effort into a situation. Now, if we go with the idea that this is talking about, the Ace of Diamonds talking about written correspondence, written communication, then here it may be written correspondence or written communication with the idea of improving, because the 7 in this particular case can be about improvement, improving something having to do with someone's work or business, right? So here we have maybe the idea of business-related communications, but this card can represent the idea that in one respect it can be about improving something, right? Now, if we're talking about this is about the potential for something to be rewarding or successful, and if we're talking about the suit of diamonds about being energy, then this would be about the energy, putting work and effort, the energy of work and effort into a situation to improve it, right? So if we want to see some sort of success or we want to achieve some kind of reward, then the following card says that we may have to work at it, because in that respect, the Seven of Clubs can be a card, that represents hard work or putting your nose to the grindstone, right? So if there is something that's going to improve and we have to put work or effort into it, it may be like we have to metaphorically roll up our sleeves, and get our hands dirty, again, metaphorically speaking, in order for that improvement to happen. Now, another possibility here, if we talk about written communication on the challenging side, the Seven of Clubs can talk about an argument, right? So there may be, as a result of some sort of communication or correspondence, that there may be an argument, right? It can also be, if we talk about the idea that this is about an engagement, then there may be some sort of engagement where there's some kind of dispute or some sort of argument, right? Again, if we go with the idea that this is about the holiday, about maybe possibly where to go or what time to be there or what's on the menu, all those kinds of things, but there may be some sort of disagreement. Again, going with the idea that one of the meanings of this card for me can be an argument. And then the last thing about the Seven of Clubs in the more positive sense, that even though there may be a situation that we are working hard at trying to improve, this card would suggest that there are going to be small difficulties. This is a small difficulties card. So again, Seven of Clubs can represent hard work, putting your nose to the grindstone, small difficulties, and the possibility of an argument, right? And as I thought I was done, coming back to the Seven of Clubs, going with the idea that this can represent hard work or putting your nose to the grindstone, sometimes it warns about being a workaholic, right? And so that would be the idea of maybe taking on too much work. So when I see a card from the suit of diamonds, just the suit emblem, and then clubs, this is about energy into work or energy into work and effort. But the pairing would suggest on some level that it pays off. There's some sort of reward attached to that work or effort. Okay, so now let's move on to the card that represents Wednesday. We have Monday, Tuesday, so now we're at Wednesday. And here we have a face card. So here we have the King of Spades. So for me, my chief meaning of the King of Spades, if I look at it as a person, this would represent a man, because when I read playing cards, all kings are men. And then the spades would represent somebody who is unmarried or somebody who's divorced, because the overall energy of this card is somebody who's single. So this could be somebody who is unmarried, somebody who is separated or divorced. And what I do is I tend to look at the direction that the person is looking in. So the King of Spades is facing the Seven of Clubs. It's in his line of sight. So sometimes from an emotional standpoint, this is a person who may be experiencing some sort of frustration, because from an emotional outlook perspective, I tend to look at the suit of clubs as, frustration or some sort of irritation. Somebody with a sense of impatience. So that may be factoring into what's going on, or it could be an argument. Remember, this could be an argument or disagreement, an argument with this particular person. Right? So now, as an approach, I call the King of Spades the Judge card. So this could represent dealing with judgment or criticism, right? And so again, we go back to the idea here that this may be talking about a disagreement or some kind of argument. That would make sense. Maybe on the other end, one person in that situation or scenario is feeling a sense of being judged or criticized, right? But if the King of Spades can represent us to some degree in terms of how we're approaching a situation, maybe just be mindful. The suit of spades for me can represent the mind and mental activity. Just be mindful if we are either demonstrating or exhibiting, being frustrated or impatient with other people, or that we are demonstrating or giving off an air of being judgmental or critical. Right? And so the other thing I would say about the King of Spades, the suit of spades for me can represent problems, difficulties, challenges, and blocks. Right? The king symbolically can represent power, control, and mastery. So this could be talking about, gaining some mastery or gaining some control over a problem a challenge, or difficulty. Right? I would say too, like in terms of this idea about the mind with the suit of spades, this is about giving us a heads up not to lose our minds. The way it's coming to me is not to make ourselves crazy this week. And maybe it's crazy making in relation to a problem, a difficulty, or some kind of challenge. Right? Because if we were going with the order of the cards, now remember, it went up here and now it's going over clubs and then spades. Usually for me, I would read this as working our way into a potential problem, challenge, or difficulty. Right, so now if we kind of take these three cards as a whole, because I'm looking at them as a lower triangle here, right? We take them into a whole, there may be something having to do with written correspondence and communication, right? It may involve a man with the idea of wanting to put some work or effort into improving some kind of challenge, problem, difficulty. Right, but on Tuesday there may be something having to do with judgment and criticism being prominent that day, or how we handle a particular problem, challenge, or difficulty. The idea here with the king being about mastery, it's about getting it under control, mastering the problem, right? Meaning like we have control over the problem and not letting the problem control us, right? And as I'm talking about the idea about controlling something, right? Maybe in our minds, this is where mental mastery may come in. You know, the idea of taking a step back, looking at the situation and asking yourself, how much power and control do I have within the situation? Is there anything within my power and control to change or improve the situation? If the answer is yes, would you be willing to take those actions, right? And understanding that if other people are playing a role or a part, you only control so much of the situation or the scenario, right? And so it just be a matter of learning or coming to some acceptance or awareness, because the suit of spades for me can represent consciousness. So coming to some awareness about what's in your control and what's not in your control. So that's how I would look at the king of spades for Tuesday. So now let's move on to Wednesday. I'm sorry, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at the heart of the reading here. So here at the heart we have, so here we have the 6 of diamonds. So we have another card from the suit of diamonds, ruling majority so far. So again, diamonds represents energy, it represents power, it represents success, but it also represents, you know, something being rewarding, and also the idea that something could be paying off, and that goes back to the idea of being rewarding, right? But it's also about what do we value. You know, this may be a week where we have to consider what do we really value, because the suit of diamonds can also be about worth and value. And again, it could also be about material resources and material concerns. With that in mind, the 6 of diamonds is a card that can talk about communication. The 6, when I read playing cards, can represent communication. So there may be some discussion or communication about money, right? And that would make sense if we're talking about maybe a situation where there's the potential for money to be made, right? And we have one card from the suit of clubs, which can represent business. You know, I talked about this idea about improving work or business, right? And so in the course of that, if that makes sense for someone, then this may be about a discussion about money. It could also be for someone if the idea about hard work and effort, maybe in the working sense or in the business sense, makes sense with the 7 of clubs, then this card would be about a raise in pay. Right, so this could be if you're working as an employee for someone else, this may be receiving some kind of gift or bonus of a financial nature, or that you're seeing a raise in maybe income being generated, right? This would be a new source of income, Ace of Diamonds. And I'm looking at these 2 cards, you know, because what we can do is we can take this middle column and read it, combine the cards together to get an individual message. So here I see, you know, the potential or a new source of income. and there's a raise in pay or a raise in income with that. Now, if we go with the idea that I was talking about with the King of Spades, in terms of like gaining some kind of control over a problem, a challenge, a difficulty, right? Then this is about the energy. What type of energy are we putting into that, right? And if I go with that in mind, then this card, the Six of Diamonds, the six is a number of responsibility, right? So here we have, you are responsible for the energy that you bring to a situation, right? So always remember that, right? And the same holds true for other people, right? And they bring a certain amount of energy to a situation as well. And so maybe for us, the distinction here is about understanding what our energy is. If we're talking about this in maybe a more metaphorical sense in terms of like money and finances, then what is our energy contribution to the situation, right? And are we willing to take responsibility for that contribution? Right, so there's that. Another meaning of the Six of Diamonds for me can represent psychology. So this may just be a matter of coming to a greater understanding about what our own personal or inner psychology is, what makes us tick. And then for some person, sometimes for me, besides psychology, this card can represent astrology, and I've widened that to represent any and all metaphysical sciences, because astrology is a metaphysical science. So there may be somebody who is maybe in the beginning stages, Ace of Diamonds, regarding a spiritually based business or service, the Seven of Clubs, because the seven is a spiritual number, right? Spirituality, I talked about that in terms of the arrangement of the cards, right? And then number 7. So this could represent a spiritual business or spiritual work. And it may center on, this is the center of the spread, it may center on, if not astrology in particular or specifically, then some other kind of metaphysical science. And that service would be delivered in a form of counseling. This is also a counseling card. And so for me, it can represent psychic counseling or psychological counseling. Any form of counseling across the spectrum. Right, and that would make sense too if we go with the idea that this is a communication card, right? And here we had communication, but maybe in a more challenging sense. And it could be if somebody is moving into this sphere, doing something more metaphysical with his or her work or business, then there may be about facing some kind of judgment or criticism for that. And that would just be a matter of, somebody who may not share a similar belief about the work, or about the nature of the work, I should say. Right, so again, Six of Diamonds can represent communication or responsibility having to do with money and finances. It can also be about responsibility, about the energy contribution that we are bringing to a situation or situations this week. And knowing what our level of contribution energetically is and those of other people. So that is how I would look at the Six of Diamonds. So now let's go on to the card that represents Friday. And here we have, okay. So here we have a card, another card, I should say, from the suit of Diamonds. So again, ruling majority. So again, Diamonds represents material concerns. So this could be money, finances, physical well-being. Could have to do with worth and value, rewards, energy, success. Now notice we went from a 6 to a 5, so here we have a decrease if we just go with the numbers. So there's a change, a decrease. But the 5 can also represent activity, right? So here we have this idea about maybe financial activity. So this would be about money changing hands, financial transactions. It can also be about expenses. So I tend to look at this card as spending money. And so it could be, paying on an expense. And then another possibility here with this could be about a loan. So this could be about maybe a situation possibly about borrowing money. And as I'm saying that, there may even be an argument around money. So there may be a money-related issue. That is the problem here. But this card can also talk about, physical changes or physical activity. So someone may be feeling inclined, and that would be interesting, especially after the holiday. If this is Thursday, then this card would be Friday. And here in the United States, we have a phenomenon called Black Friday. That is a day I stay home. I don't go anywhere. But this would be a day about spending money, right? Financial transactions, spending money. And this could be, potentially spending money on expensive items. But what I was going to say in terms of physical activity or physical changes, after the holiday, Thanksgiving is a day where people break bread and some people eat and some people eat quite a bit. So this could be maybe somebody feeling the next day after that they really need to be physically active that day. So that could be, walking, that could be exercising, any type of, physical activity, right? But it may come on the heels of, having eaten quite a bit the day before. Now, if I go with the idea that the King of Spades can represent a judge, then sometimes the Five of Diamonds can represent, a legal matter that's pending. And with that, going with the idea that this card, Ace of Diamonds, can represent written correspondence, or it's the letter card, the Five of Diamonds can represent paperwork or documentation that's connected or associated with that legal matter. So this could be, motions being filed, petitions being filed, legal briefs being filed, affidavits, those kinds of things, right? And so in light of the fact that we just had in the United States, we just had impeachment hearings for the public, this could be talking about, and especially the King of Spades and the Five of Diamonds, maybe something related or associated with that, right? It could make me think of the possibility of, getting closer to the possibility of articles of impeachment for our president being made public. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But that was my first thought with the idea that this card can represent paperwork or documentation in association with a legal matter. But from a more general standpoint, I'm going to go with the idea that this is talking about the phenomenon known as Black Friday and the idea about spending money and possibly spending money on, expensive items. And so with that in mind, I'm going to come back to this card because what did I say about this card? This card is also about financial responsibility. So it could just be that some people may need to exercise some sense of control when it comes to their finances and not spending more than they need to spend or more that they can spend, right? It makes me feel like going beyond your means kind of thing. And then that would make sense because the suit of spades in that regard can talk about this idea about cutting something out or elimination, right? So that's what I would say about the Five of Diamonds. Let's now move our attention to the card for Saturday. And here we have another Diamonds card. This is really wild. All right, so here again, we have another card from the suit of diamonds, again, ruling majority, right? So now here we have a queen. So queens for me, whereas kings can represent men, queens can represent women. So here we have a woman and a man. For me, my first go-to with this is if we're talking about spending money, right? Because now remember, the cards are connected. So if this is about spending money or financial activity, then this card can represent a woman who may be extravagant with money, right? So, all that talk I just did about financial responsibility and staying within your financial means, not going above and beyond that. It may be for a woman in particular because she has a tendency to be quite extravagant, right? And now the next thing that I notice is that we have a relationship between the two cards here because we have a queen on top and a king of spades on the bottom. So here we have a woman and a man, right? And so going with that, if this represents a person, then this card, the queen, represents a man with a woman on his mind. So this may be a man who's thinking about, a woman possibly in terms of how extravagant she might be about spending money, right? And then conversely, this would be a woman who may want to get something under control, because usually when I read cards, the card that's underneath a significator card, so these could be two significators, let's say, then this would be about something that she needs to get under control, right? And then if we take the suits just by themselves, here we have diamonds and spades, and so here we have the possibility here of a financial challenge, right? And so getting that under control. Now, queens symbolically can represent caring and nurturing, just like I talked about the kings can represent power, control, and mastery. Queens can represent caring and nurturing, but also this idea about receptivity. So it's about maybe caring or nurturing on a financial level, on a material level, on a physical level, if we go with the idea that the diamonds can represent something of a physical nature. Caring about one's values. And that would make sense in this regard. One of the things that I've come to some awareness about when it comes to money, diamonds, right? When we're spending money on something, on some level, we are saying that we value that, or there's something about our intrinsic value system that's in accordance to that item that we're purchasing, right? So it may be just a matter as we're involved in financial transactions this week to pay attention to those and saying, what does that say about what I value? Another thing that I'm seeing, because the queen is not looking at the five of diamonds, that for some people this may be a week where we're doing some inner work on our own sense of worth and value, like our self-worth and self-value. Because one of the things that I have come for this card to mean, the Queen of Diamonds, is that it can represent, our own sense of worth and value. I tend to look at this card with the idea of the L'Oreal tagline, the idea where the women in those commercials say, because I'm worth it. So this could be an issue about self-worth and self-value, but it may be tied to maybe more physical, either about, it's a tied to like how much money we have or how we look, our appearance, going with the idea that this is about financial activity and physical activity, or making some physical changes, right? Somebody may be invested in that. It just came to me. Diamonds can represent investment, right? We are invested in that, or we're putting energy into that because we want to make some changes, right? So the physical changes or the material changes could be a boost to our self-worth and self-esteem. And then the last thing I want to say is, if this is about financial activity or money changing hands, five of diamonds, and this card can represent, a loan, financial responsibility, then there may be a woman who's tied to that. When I see the Queen of Diamonds and the Six of Diamonds together, this could usually be a woman of financial means, and there may be a situation in which she's being asked or she's being approached for a loan. In this regard, I sometimes see this card as either a stepmother or a mother-in-law. And then the only other thing I will notice is that if we go with the idea that this can represent a man and a woman, then they may be in a space of disagreement, because I notice that the queen is looking this way. She's looking out of the spread or the layout, and the king of spades is looking into the spread of the layout. So there may be something about, not seeing eye to eye, or having a different viewpoint or a different perspective on the situation. And that may cause some disagreement, and that brings me right back to this card. Remember, one of the things I said was about the possibility of a disagreement or an argument. So now let's look at our final card wrapping up this reading. And here we have the Six of Hearts. Okay, so the Six of Hearts can represent, first thing, it can represent the past, right? So there may be something having to do with a past related situation, right, that we are working our way through. That would be the suit of clubs, right? So there's maybe a lot of energy, all these cards, the diamonds, a lot of energy connected to the past. And notice that we have the number 6 repeating. So again, remember, the 6 is about communication. And it's also about responsibility, right? So here with the Six of Diamonds, remember we talked about the idea of maybe communication around money. Here we have an emotional conversation or emotional communication, right? Because the suit of hearts can represent feelings, emotions. So this could be about an emotional conversation, or we're talking about our feelings, or we're talking about a relationship. The suit of diamonds can also be about healing. So this could be about healing the past. And the Six of Hearts for me can represent masculine energy. So I tend to look at that card as representing a male friend or a male relative. For me personally speaking, when the Six of Hearts comes up, I always think of my brother. So this could be for somebody's brother is involved. Or there may be a situation as the week comes to a close, that would be on Sunday, having to do with a male relative. Now, one of the older meanings of the Six of Hearts, it can represent a book, and with that, it carries meanings like knowledge, study, and learning. So there may be something learned by week's end. And then the meaning that I have attached to the card, going with the idea about learning, that the Six of Hearts can represent enlightenment. So again, Six of Hearts can talk about an emotional conversation, an emotional discussion, maybe around a disagreement in a relationship. Then this would make sense. What can we do to heal that? Especially if the disagreement is rooted in the past. How can we heal that? How can we move beyond that? What kind of knowledge is going to be gained by week's end? How can we become more enlightened by week's end? And I will wrap up on this note, just as I talked about, being responsible for the energy that we bring to a situation, being responsible for our contribution. Then this is about emotional responsibility, taking responsibility for our emotions and our feelings. And I'm going to say that would make sense if we have any kind of disagreement where there may be some heated words being exchanged. Remember, the Seven of Clubs is about an argument. And sometimes what emotion is displayed when we're having a disagreement or an argument? Anger, right? So taking responsibility for our emotions and our emotional reactions and responses, right? It reminds me of something that somebody much wiser than myself once taught me. It's like the idea when we say, like, somebody's making us feel a certain way. And really what it is that we're making the choice. We're choosing that emotional reaction or response. So maybe one message this week is just to kind of maybe step back and observe, maybe non-judgmentally observe, King of Spades, our emotional reactions and responses, and ask ourselves, what is this emotional reaction and response teaching me about me, going with the idea that this is about knowledge and learning. And so on that note, I'm going to bring this week's Oracle Outlook to a close. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you for sharing space here with me for this week's reading, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day. And for those of you who are having Thanksgiving, that you are celebrating it, or that you are observing it, I hope you have a happy holiday. Take care.